Today's presentation is called the observer-based science. And this is, one day this term will become an oxymoron, you know? It will be, yeah, I mean, it's like you're saying science is science. Because truly speaking, the only science that there is the observer-based science. Now, we also call it the science of consciousness. We also call it the science of qualia. I will interchange those terms as we go forward. But particularly, I wanted to emphasize the observer part in juxtaposition to the observed or to the object-based science, which is our current science. I have a lot of slides, so since Maurizio just told us that all of this will be online, please do not become frustrated by trying to take everything down. They're mostly guide for me to, if anything, to keep track of what I'm saying. In fact, I debated myself before coming here that maybe I would just be looking at the screen and not seeing the slides, but I felt that that would not be fair. So there are the slides. I may be going through them fairly fast. Okay, so what is the observer-based science? It is a science of consciousness. And the proposal here is the following. We are in need to revise science. It doesn't mean to throw away 300, 400 years of wonderful, wonderful achievements. I would be the last one to propose that because I'm a scientist myself. You know, after all, the reason that I'm proposing that we revise science is not because there is a compelling need to tear down science. No. It's because science itself regenerates itself all the time, right? So actually, what I'm proposing here is not very radical. Good science reinvents itself. If it didn't, it would be a dogma. It would not be science. So science is not dogma. However, scientists, many scientists are dogmatists. They have systems of belief. And I think we struggle a little bit about the reasons behind it. So I'll tell you what it is. It's based on ego awareness. It's really as simple as that. And actually Max Planck made that very clear. It's based on ego awareness. We as human beings, not just as scientists, are threatened by anything that is not familiar to us. The other component that seems to be missing in today's object-based science is the whole acknowledgement of human experience. And what is really the most fundamental aspect of human experience? It's the L word, right? It's called love. I don't necessarily mean love between a man and a woman. I don't mean love for poetry or love for science, even love for science. I mean the experience of being alive and being happy to be alive. And science yet is to acknowledge that. And if it's not acknowledging it, it means that we are missing something fundamental. You may say, well, this is feelings. So I'm going to talk about qualia science. Yeah, feelings are feelings, right? And they need to be there. And the challenge is to form perhaps a formalized and self-consistent way to expand the way we do science. I emphasize consistent and formalized. It doesn't mean that when we start dealing with the science of observer-based or qualia or science of consciousness, all these, I use them as interchangeable terms to emphasize that this science of consciousness is huge. doesn't mean that it will necessarily have to follow exactly the same rules as current science. But it has to be self-consistent, and it will have to be formalized. One particular element that I am concerned is the probabilistic interpretation of what appear to be random phenomena. Surely that has been challenged by the work, as we heard, of Dean Radin and other people like Bem, 75 years of work, and we now wonder why it's not accepted yet. Perhaps because we have not discussed the ontology and the epistemology, ontology being the foundations of the new science, and the epistemology, how that new science is going to be conducted. You need both. And certainly, those aspects were challenged by quantum theory in a fundamental way. But the revolution was started with quantum theory has not been completed. It's the sort of unfinished revolution, so to speak. And perhaps it's now time to take it to the next stage. Why revise science? Because there are some fundamental issues, such as consciousness and mind, such as what is the nature of ultimate reality, and in fact, the origin and end of the universe. What else is left? It's actually a big embarrassment for science if we cannot answer the two most fundamental. Deepak Chopra talked about the two fundamental questions. What is the nature of the universe, and what's the nature of consciousness? We have ideas, but not in a formalized way. And by the way, the recent hoopla about the Higgs particle, which was great, and Nobel Prize was given, you don't hear much about the other side. And the other side is that the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, is not discovering the supersymmetric particles that are supposed to be there. The Higgs seems to be there, but not the next generation, not in the next level of particles. And that already is putting some very serious questions about the so-called standard model of particle physics, which is needed if you want to go forward with the theory of everything. But we'll leave that as it is. So I already said, build upon, extend, not replace. Observer-based science. I'll give you the punchline, so even if I run out of time, at least you've seen this. What are the fundamental elements here? Okay, right let's take them from the top. Fundamental consciousness is the foundation of the universe. It is the I consciousness, the perfect I consciousness. It's not the ego. It's not the skin-encapsulated reality that we call the body and the mind. It's absolutely undifferentiated consciousness. We'll give some hints, perhaps, what it is, but I don't have to give you any hints. It's your nature. You are absolutely undifferentiated consciousness. End of game. Actually, my talk would finish right now. We can all go home, have a glass of wine. That's all it is. Then what is the problem? There's no problem. The issue is the mind. The mind. The mind is our greatest friend, and the mind is our greatest enemy. There's no enemy out there. All the enemies are inside. And until we realize that, we're going to keep killing each other. Seriously. And it's getting us to the point that, not so much for our old-timers like myself here, that have a few years on this planet, but for the next generations, we are not doing them service. We're giving them an earth that they'll have to clean up a big mess. Big time. Big time. And again, I don't usually say these things trying to create fear, because God knows we have plenty of fear given to us through television and media, right? And through our government, all the forms of government, all that they're doing is giving us fear to continue propagating a certain set of values, systems of thinking, market forces, blah, blah, blah. The status quo. Science challenges the status quo. This science, not the future science, even regular science challenges status quo because it asks fundamental questions. So if this fundamental I consciousness is fundamental, it's beyond space and time. You may say, who? In space-time, fundamental? Up to a certain point. Even today's physics says that space-time is not fundamental. In fact, the great physicist Roger Penrose has been saying that for about 30 years. And he's saying that, in fact, the fundamental aspects of physics is in the geometry or the pre-geometry out of which space-time arises. Human self-awareness is part of it. Biological structures possess it. It is existent everywhere and at all times. If it's existent everywhere and at all times, this is conscious. They say, ooh, you have gone a little bit too far, even for this crowd. I'm not talking about human consciousness. I'm talking about fundamental consciousness. And we will see in the great monistic schools, primarily coming from India, but also they came from Greece, they came from all traditions, that they all say the same thing. Process itself is fundamental. Process. Heraclitus of ancient Greece, perhaps, I would say, almost on an equal footing as Plato and Socrates, said that everything moves, everything flows, and you can never step inside the same waters a second time. He didn't really mean waters, he meant the flow of life. We call that, in Kashmir Shaivism, spanda. Spanda meaning the vibration of consciousness, which continuously changes. If the infinite is the basis of everything, the next question is, well, how does the infinite become finite? Right? Actually, you know, the infinite is easy to describe, but hard to experience. Easy to describe, but hard to experience. Actually, it's there all the time. All we need to do is slow down a little bit the mind, and it's there. It's there. But it's easy to describe mathematically, because the infinite is infinite. We have number theory. We have ways to describe infinities in mathematics. It's the same everywhere. No structure. You say that's it? The next question is, how does the infinite become finite? By assuming certain limitations out of its own free will. Why? I'm not going to answer the question why. Whenever you ask the question why, I will answer back, why not? We really don't know. They say it's fundamental nature to play with the universe, to play and create infinite universes. In this process, subject and object are fundamental. It's central to everything. It's actually fundamental and deeply connected to quantum theory. In quantum theory, you have the complementarity or the paradoxical relationship between a wave and a particle. And I'm not going to go through that because there were so many good speakers in this conference that went through it. I think actually, in fact, my friend Lothar really went step by step and described it very well. And so my job is easier because I don't have to go through quantum theory. But you can also get in my book, by the way, if you still want to get some book. So a fundamental aspect of quantum theory is the participatory aspect of the quantum. Perhaps John Archibald Wheeler phrased it as best as it can be phrased, that, in fact, no phenomenon is a phenomenon unless it is an observed phenomenon. Phenomena are not existent independent of observers. That's why we call it observer-based science. You may say, well, I close my eyes, I open them, and you're still there. Are you telling me you're a figment of my imagination? As soon as you close your eyes and you open them up again, I'm still here. I will grant you that. But if you really think about it deeply, the mind tends to fill in the blanks. If we're not in the forest and the tree falls, we have no way of knowing if the tree makes noise or not. If we're not in the forest, we have. And you say, well, but you record it, right? You have a record, there's nobody there to record it. Okay? Now, somebody needs to listen to the recording. If you make a recording and never look at it, the answer, you will never know the answer. Is it as simple as that? Perhaps it's as simple as that. Speakers talk about Descartes, and we just heard a little while ago that, in fact, perhaps it was a good way to split the two because, you know, Europe was emerging from the Middle Ages, and the power of the church was still very, very strong. So it was good to say, okay, you know, give God to God and Caesar to Caesar, so to speak, you know. Okay, you guys do your thing, we do our things. We're not going to have a war between us. But the way perhaps you can rephrase what Descartes said is, we exist and observe, therefore everything exists, rather than we exist, that we think, and therefore we exist. We exist and observe, therefore everything exists. You may say, we humans? Yes, we humans, but also everything else in the universe. We observers. So we are observers, right? Now the next question at some point, and remind me if I don't cover it, is how many observers are in the universe? We have to do that at the very end, perhaps. Part of the participatory universe is a Schrödinger experiment, which, by the way, you notice that the actual picture, I have it the old way. Now, the title, I have to decide to not really kill the poor cat anymore, but just put it to sleep. So 50% chance of the cat being asleep, 50% a chance of the cat being awake, if no one is observing. There is a bit of a problem, which actually I pointed out years ago in my book, Looking In, Seeing Out. The cat is also aware. The cat is inside the box. It's aware whether it is asleep or not. So anyway, but of course, Schrödinger wanted to make a point. In this experiment, by the way, we know that actually particles or atoms can be in suspended animation before a measurement is made. That's what really it means. One of the greatest results of quantum theory is quantum non-locality, which actually arises from entanglement. And again, there were many, I would say, good talks about entanglement. It now appears that in some versions of quantum theory that there is a global entanglement everywhere at all times. And this is actually an amazing situation if that's the case. But even in ordinary quantum theory, you have basically Bell's theorem, which I won't bother you very much. Again, it is, you can find it in books, you can find it in my book, I think you can find it in Lothar's book. Basically, it says that the degree of correlations can be measured in laboratories. So what used to be questions that were philosophical questions, now they can be carried out in the laboratory. In fact, what I tell my students is that this whole issue of consciousness coming out of inert, so-called inert objects is a little lesson. The inanimate is reminding the animate what the animate has forgotten. That's it. The inanimate particles are reminding us, the smart people, the animate, what we have forgotten. Particles in the laboratory are giving these correlations that we cannot deny them anymore. Well, they're still being denied. The consequences of quantum theory are still being denied 85, 80 years later. And they're still arguing and going back and forth. Why? Tough to give up that reality of external reality, which is safe, we can understand it, which keeps the skin-encapsulated ego for a while. Because the ego, by the way, is afraid of death, even though it knows that it's going to die. What a situation. Poor ego, you know. So we have a choice. We can be the ego or we can be the absolute. How many of you would like to be the ego? Don't be shy. Raise your hand. Good. One very honest person. How many of you would like to be the absolute? How many to be the absolute consciousness? And I guess the rest of you are agnostics. You don't know, right? It's fine. We are both. We are both. We're both the ego and absolute consciousness. Common sense fails in local realism. There are some incredible things about the universe coming out of quantum theory. Incredible amount of fine-tuning. The greatest fine-tuning is 1 part to the 120. You know what that means? There's no number in the universe. 1 followed by 120 zeros. It's way more than particles in the universe. This is the fine-tuning of the universe that has to do with the cosmological constant. There are countless other coincidences. One of my favorite ones is that if the sun did not put out in the right wavelength of radiation, the bulk of its energy, and the atmosphere did not happen to have transparency through the molecular interactions in the same part of the spectrum, and we adopting to observe the light from the sun because it is our parent star, there will be no life. You have there, in those coincidences, you have macroscopic and microscopic phenomena giving you this coincidence to allow life to develop. So you have two choices. These are the two choices. Either consciousness is fundamental and designs the whole thing, it's self-driven, there's evolution. There's no evolution. The evolution happens all the time. Remember the term span that I mentioned? It's dynamic, it's continuously evolving. Either the universe, consciousness drives the whole thing. Why? Because the consciousness is a universe. It's self-driven. There's no external God, folks. There's only internal God. And that internal God appears as an external God, just to play games with us. So the God of the religion, hard to maintain. If he, she, it, totally outside. So it's self-driven. And there are actually things in quantum theory that tell you how it's done. Or we live in a randomly picked universe that is so amazingly precise that it can't be true. There must be an almost infinite number of other universes, and we happen to be in the right one that gives us factors like 10 to the 120 or 10 to the 50. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Or these biological coincidences, weak force, weak interaction coincidences. By the way, if the weak interaction was off by 1%, there would be no supernova explosions, no collapse of the core of a supernova, no formation of heavy elements. You would not be here. Did you know that the weak interaction, which most of us don't know much about, is so precisely tuned to allow the explosions of supernova that form heavy elements? It goes on and on like that. You find them everywhere. You find them in biology, you find them in cosmology, you find them in astrophysics, everywhere. So if we live in a randomly picked universe, I submit to you that's the end of science. Because it says we are here because we are here. End of discussion. And by the way, I don't believe nature works that way. I don't believe that, remember Einstein said God does not play dice. Actually, I agree with him. God does not play with coins. Flip a coin, flip a coin, flip. After 10 to 35 years, you have a monkey that finally got Hamlet right. It's absurd. Have you seen a monkey sitting on a typewriter? Monkeys want to eat bananas. They don't want to sit in front of the typewriter, right? And of course, even Shakespeare didn't write Hamlet by sitting in front of a typewriter, right? But, this whole preposterous thing that if randomness will give you order after a long period of time, is preposterous. How many universes? At least 10 to 500. Another possibility is 10 to the 10 to the 10 to the 7 universes. Now wrap your mind around that one. 10 to the 10 to the 10 to the 7. You can't even write down a piece of paper. The paper that you will need is much bigger than the universe. In this multiverse idea of randomness, the next universe similar to ours is a gigaplex meters away. Gigaplex. Try to pronounce that one. Anyway, gigaplex meters away. That's 10 to the 10 to the 100 meters away. Far, 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 far away. Far away. What's the point? So the amazing hypothesis I propose is the underlying universal consciousness operates at every level, and it is the fundamental I-ness. Why is it so amazing? Because it's amazing. It's so simple that it's amazing. If it's that simple, it's simple and also profound. It operates through universal principles. These principles, and I will go through them, limit universal consciousness. Why? Because universal consciousness is unlimited. So it has to take on certain limitations. In particle physics, we call those symmetry breakings. For example, if I go this way, in this direction, I'm breaking the symmetry of space. I'm choosing a particular direction. The infinite doesn't have a direction, doesn't move. It's eternal and static. So something must break the symmetry. These principles are the following, and I have to tell you, they're not necessarily unique, but some sort of this kind of principles must be operated. The first one is the one that we all owe to our friend Niels Bohr. It's called complementarity. Basically it says, opposites are complementary. Contraria sunt complementia, in Latin. This is his call of arms that he had adopted. The opposites are not always opposites, always truly opposites. They are complementary. Principle number one. Principle number two. Actually, principle number one is responsible for the wave-particle complementarity, contextuality, for entanglement, non-locality. They all come out of complementarity. You can say, why did you choose that? Why don't you choose non-locality? You could do it that way too. It doesn't really matter. It's the class of principles under the general term complementarity. You have complementarity in biological systems. The way you observe your finger, for example, depends on the scales over which you're observing it. If you are observing macroscopically, like this, my finger looks solid. That's it, right? But if you zero in, you will start seeing molecules coming out of my finger. If you zero in even further, you're going to start seeing molecules. Zero in even further. Eventually, you get the idea. You get down to the point of superstrings. Is there a problem?
I'd like to check. I want to change this.
Yes? Okay. So, complementarity assumes certain boundaries of observation. Okay? If you have no boundaries, you have no observation. This is my boundary, right? When I observe my body, this is my boundary. When I close my eyes, it's a different kind of observation. Right? So it's really simple. Principle number 2. As here, so elsewhere. If it was not for the second principle, you could not do physics. You could not do with science. You could not even talk to each other. We could not talk to each other. Okay? Have you thought about that? If this one here is not the same as you will not be able to talk to me, and vice versa. 10 to the 80 particles in the universe. One followed by 80 zeros. They're the same. Except for one thing. You can't pack them too close together because they have some certain quantum properties. Is there a difference between the electrons in my brain and the electrons inside a nuclear reactor? Yes or no? Yes, they are. They're the same. Why? Because take those electrons out of there. They still operate the same way. So what's the difference between the electrons in the nuclear reactor and my brain? It's the context. But they are the same. Second principle, as here, so elsewhere. We can call that, in a fancy way, recursion. And there are some amazing recursive relationships. For example, is this one on the left is a brain cell, and the one on the right is the universe. Are they the same? They're not, but they look exactly the same. Are clusters of galaxies nothing more than neurons in the universe? Good question. Second principle. Third principle. Sensing and seeking others. And that actually opens the whole issue of seeking each other, love, bonding together, forming atoms, forming molecules. You may say, well, wait a second. Are atoms sentient? I have no idea if they have identity, if they know their own identity, but they act as if they know each other. So if something makes quack quack, looks like a duck, is it a duck or is it a horse? It's a duck. You got it. I cannot prove to you that electrons are alive and are thinking like humans. But they have sentience. They seek protons. They seek other particles to form atoms. Cells seek other cells. We've heard that 10 to 1. We're invaded. Our bodies are invaded by aliens. No one has done a movie yet called The Alien in My Body. 9 out of 10 cells in our bodies are aliens. It's good. They're nice. They're our friends. Mostly. A very small percentage of them are the bad guys. And they cause problems. And sometimes our own cells cause problems, as you know. This is a paper that my friend Neil Tice and myself have done, published. A lot of these things we have already published them. So actually, you can actually begin to publish these things. We take things one at a time, you know. Rather than going and saying, consciousness is everything there is, say, okay, let's take sentience. We got it published. Complementarity in biology. We got it published. Chipping away. So here it is. Complementarity. Yes and or no. Is it yes or is it no? It's yes and or no. It's paradoxical. Complementarity is a huge paradox. The universe is paradoxical. Folks, let's take it for granted we live in a strange, paradoxical universe. Otherwise, the universe will be very boring. Imagine if we were all identical to each other. How long do you think we would last before going crazy? I bet you 1 hour. Maybe less.
2 days.
2 days if you have strong mind. But we will really go crazy. Paradoxical. I'm not the same as you, but at the same time I'm the same as you. This paradox of mystery, sometimes we call it the mystery of existence, is paradoxical. Recursion, as here, so elsewhere. It makes science possible. If you didn't have recursion, there would be no science, there would be no human language, there would be no structure in the universe, there would be no universe. These principles hold the universe together. Third, implies the presence of observers. Sentience actually tells you that there is observers out there. How many of them? For now, let's say infinite number. And you would say, well, Menas, what you've done is replace something with something else. Now you give us another infinity here. How many observers are there? So you're getting the answer. You're guessing it. I already told you. An interesting application of the recursion principle is called the Pauli exclusion principle. Pauli exclusion principle is actually a manifestation of recursion. Fractals, the holographic universe, are aspects of recursion. But that don't necessarily apply at every level. But the category, the general category of recursion, has these characteristics. Sentience, the universe is participatory. The observer effect that von Neumann talked about, etc., etc. Oops. So, without reading all the words, basically what happens is out of the infinite vibration of consciousness, through assuming limitations out of its own free will. Why? Because it's got to be totally free in its will, otherwise it's not infinite. Yeah? Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, I see with my toe, I hear with my arm, I have infinite powers. And by the way, his disciple Arjuna says, show me your cosmic form, please. I want to see your cosmic form. He says, are you sure you want to see my cosmic form? He says, yes, please. Because Arjuna says, this guy is driving my chariot, right? Of course, it's all allegorical, right? He's driving my chariot, and he is supposed to be Lord Krishna, the universal consciousness of the universe. So show me the universal consciousness. Show me who you are. He said, you really don't want that. He said, no, show me. And he shows him, and he falls down. He says, I can't take it, because he says he sees infinite universe coming out and disappearing, black holes, whatever. They didn't call them black holes in those days. He sees stars exploding. He sees countless human beings being slaughtered. He's ready to fight the battle, and he knows, he sees that he's going to kill the opponents, who happen to be his relatives. He says, I don't want to do that. But he sees all of what's going to happen. All of a sudden, he gives him the cosmic vision. It's not benign. He says everything. And he says, you know what? Go back to Krishna. Because Krishna, of course, is a familiar form, and he's his friend. So he goes back. Qualia. An important component is to go from quanta to qualia. Qualia are what is happening to you right now. You have a sense, input, sensory input. You have a feeling, you have an image, or you have a thought. Your consciousness operates through qualia. We believe the fundamental elements of the universe are not quanta, but they are qualia. Even quanta, we experience them through qualia. The hard problem is there's nothing that we can think of that can explain the hard problem. Actually, the hard problem is the easiest problem. The hard problem is impossible problem if you take an object-based reality that the objects are out there and they're never the same as the observer. Then it's an impossible problem. It's not just hard, it's an impossible problem. Or it is a trivial problem if everything is consciousness. It really comes down to that. It's always, by the way, notice, it's a binary choice. It's fundamental. That's why computers work, because of the binary choice, 0 or 1. How colors are formed. What are colors? If we open somebody's brain, a skull, whatever, we're not going to find colors inside. Here is a metaphor for qualia. It's not true, of course, because this is not a particular image I created on the computer. But everything we experience, including mathematics, are qualia. This is my own qualia, by the way. I decided to show you one of my own paintings. Okay, so it's my own painting. So what is this here? Well, I'm now beginning to paint things that, just like Lothar's painting, have the sea at the top, the waters at the top, right on the bottom. And you see the birds and the fishes are flying down. Why? Because the water is up there, so they can fly down. So this is a qualia experience. And in a way, it's a quantum reality because it gives you the impossible. So art allows us to do the impossible. I won't go through this. You can find them in some of our articles. There are 10 qualia principles, just to show you that actually we thought about it. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes and talk about, okay, what's the next step? One of the next steps is perhaps what my friend Don Hoffman is doing. Basically, really start from, and he gave a brilliant talk, so I'm not going to repeat his talk, but basically take that consciousness is fundamental, and then, in his case, he builds the interface model of reality. And objects are nothing more than conscious experiences of observers. Conscious realism. Actually, he had a previous paper, but I think the latest paper is coming out pretty soon. I have a similar idea, but it's approaching from a different way. I call that the subject-object mathematics. Basically, consciousness, again, is fundamental. And you can write these relationships between observers and observed in terms of Hilbert space algebra. Actually, it's very simple. And in fact, you can map the three fundamental powers of the infinite, which we'll discuss in just a little bit: will, knowledge, and action. In terms of the I am, that, and that I am, comes down to those simple statements. And the mathematics that you need, it's actually very simple. It's based on just 0 and 1. Not our 0 and 1, but basically absence of anything and fullness of existence. Can be done. What's the point here? We believe that we probably should develop the mathematics of consciousness. You may say, I thought you said consciousness is beyond anything. We're going to push as far as we can the mathematics. Because if you want to make a formal system, you have to base it in some form of mathematics. It's actually quite exciting. So I will finish with a couple of things. I still have about 10 minutes, so we're doing fine. Monistic philosophical systems. And here is, I want to concentrate on two monistic systems: Shaivism and Vedanta. They say more or less the same thing. Why? They had to say the same thing. They use different languages, different metaphors. In Shaivism, which is a system that was developed 800 to 1100 before current era, absolute consciousness has two aspects. It has the light of consciousness. Light is not this light, it's the light. It gives light to existence. The being is light. By this existence, it makes everything exist. And the second part is knowledge, or capacity to know, what's called vimarsha. The light of consciousness and the ability to know. In Vedanta, it's called, you probably know the terms, Satchitananda, existence, awareness, and bliss that comes out of existence. They're more or less the same. It's the bliss that gives rise to the universe. What is the bliss? The Absolute cannot help but give rise to infinite universes. That's it. Why? Because it's full of so much blissful infinite energy. Its nature is to create. Just create? No. Maintain and destroy. And Krishna showed Arjuna that all these things are taking place. And the human mind says, no, I only want the creation and maintenance. Don't show me the destruction. You know, it was the ancient Greeks. They were going through, I guess, the wars between Peloponnese and Athens, and they were lamenting the suffering that was taking place. They started praying to Zeus, and they said, you know, Zeus, take away this destruction, this misery. And Heraclitus said, you know, guys, you don't understand, but you're praying, what does it say? 5. Ooh. You don't understand, but you are praying for the end of the universe. If you take one complementary aspect, the other goes away. So I'll go through fairly fast because my friend Ronald showed me something over there. Shaivism is based on Shiva Sutras. You will have those. And these writings were not just philosophical, they were very practical. For example, the Vijnana Bhairava, which means the wisdom of Bhairava, the Absolute, has 112 exercises. The first and the second actually have to do with the breath. It starts from very simple things. Observing your breath. You know, many times you say observe your breath. They do it scientifically. So in fact, these philosophical systems were very practical. My favorite one is the Pratya Bijna Hridayam because it describes the cosmic aspects. And it says, the first sutra, the first stanza, says that supremely independent universal consciousness is the cause of manifestation, maintenance, and reabsorption of the universe. That's it. Supremely independent consciousness is responsible for everything. If that's the case, and we are Chitti, which is the name for universal consciousness, by the way, it's the female aspect of Shiva, we are also performing those 5 actions. And in fact, they say, if you start observing those 5 actions, let's start with the 3 actions. In your everyday life, you will become liberated. Why? Because you will see that the whole thing is nothing more than a continuous game of universal consciousness, and you are part of that universal consciousness. You yourself create a thought, maintain it, and reabsorb it. Not you. Actually, the thought comes through your mind, which brings down to the final point. And I have a couple more slides to show you in terms of the principles. Because you see, what I'm saying here tonight, not only is possible, but I think we have taken very important steps to set up this observer-based science. So, in fact, if indeed it's that simple, then we ourselves are part of the infinite. We create an infinity of everything, or part of the infinite. We are observers, but if you really think about it, there's only one observer. I gave you the final punchline. There's only one observer. And you are that observer. You are that observer. I can go around the room. You are that observer. We're all that observer. There's only one observer. Why? If there's many observers, you get into infinite recursions. You can't get out of it. It's got to be only one observer. And here's the observer, dancing around. It's called Paramashiva. Conceals. And the 5th action is the most important one. It's called grace. Reveals. Every religion has the element of grace in it. I will finish by showing you the future observer-based science. We don't have time to go through each of them, but you see what I've done here is on one column, give the topic, in the second column, the observer-based science, and the third column, the object-based science. So let's take one of them. Let's take the self. What is the self in the observer-based science? Universal consciousness, perfect eye-awareness. In current object-based science, it's the ego. Or maybe it does not even exist in many psychological systems. Many systems are even denying the one thing that we're mostly aware of, our own awareness of existence, right? So there is actually quite a bit of difference between the two. You can go through the list. So you can see the difference between the two. Here's another one. Qualia. in the observer-based science are agents of experience in consciousness, experience all there is. In object-based science, they're mysterious, they're the hard problem, I don't understand them, and forget it about it. Here's another one. Science. What is science? Here's my favorite one. A human activity in observer-based science for consciousness to study levels of reality. Observer-based and object-based sciences should be seen as complementary activities. In fact, the object-based science will eventually be accepted as the same way as Newtonian mechanics is a limiting case of relativistic mechanics. It's valid, but it's under certain limits. Object-based science will be seen to be a special case of observer-based science. In object-based science, science is taken as the absolute truth. The only reality, valid human activity to discover truth. Wow, that's too much, right, to give on science. It's the only way, man. No, it's one of the many ways. And finally, what are devices? Devices, such as we use them for health reasons. They can be agents to conscious processes and interactions. Medical devices will turn out to be holistic. In the object-based approach, they are dead objects, useful in specific contexts, including medicine. No wonder why dead objects make us mostly dead. Who wants to find himself or herself inside the hospital? It's the last place you want to find yourself. Why? Because it's full of dead devices. Why? Actually, devices are not dead. It's the context. It's the state of mind that sees them as dead. If this mind sees them as dead, they are dead. Thank you very much.